Dr. Cheers, thank you so much for joining us today. To start, could you share a little about your background?
Absolutely. Thank you again, Megan, for having me. This is really exciting. My name is Imani Cheers. I am a cultural curator and commentator, but more importantly, I'm a storyteller, and that goes back to my parents. Honestly, my mother was an avid I think now we don't call it, but like a scrapbooker. She
Mhm.
was family documentarian, and so she always had a camera, with her. Of course, this is like shooting on film, and I just always understood. I'm the oldest of 3, and I understood the importance of documenting, even if it's everything from, a sporting event to Girl Scouts to, family holidays. It was just important to document because those are the ways that you held on to those memories. My father, he was a photojournalist, for Ebony and Jet magazine, which for the long time, in particular in the Black press, very specifically, he worked with them and covered primarily everything from the Soweto school uprisings, June 16th, 1976, to Prince's Purple Rain tour in 1984, to the release of Nelson Mandela from Robben Island Prison, February 12th of 1990. And he had been there for, as I said, 25 years. We had a dark room in our basement. His mentor was Gordon Parks, who, when you're 4 years old and people come around, you don't understand the context of who these people are outside of your kind of childhood or experiences. And so I grew up around not only people who documented family memories and moments, but then also in this larger context of history. And so everything from student protest in South Africa to, like I said, Prince's, you know, Purple Rain tour. That image is actually one of those images, I should say, is up at the African American History and Culture Museum. I took a group of students there on Tuesday, and I love to stop by and see that image because, first of all, who doesn't love Prince?
Yeah,
And then second, like, it's just cool, right? It's just
yeah.
really cool. And so that's where my background in storytelling really came from. My father, in 1995, he was on a Fulbright in South Africa. He went around. His Fulbright was asking what we called, what was at the time, were teenagers, high school students, at the end of apartheid. So Nelson Mandela had been president at that point for about 9 months. And with this Fulbright, our family moved from the Washington, D.C. area to Johannesburg. And my father embarked on this Fulbright. And I got to, at 15, I was 15 at the time, I got to kind of be his assistant, like his teaching assistant. And he went into different townships and he taught these photography workshops. And at the end of these 3-week workshops, and the students, with the sponsorship from Kodak, we had a photography exhibition, and it was just a really amazing thing to see not only young people like my peers, right? These were all my peers at the time, but we came from such different backgrounds, and to see how they were grappling with and understanding not only the end of this brutal system of apartheid, but then this palpable, hopeful energy for the future and what could possibly come next, and the fact that their liberator, essentially, in Nelson Mandela, was now leading the country. Everything was about hope and healing from this horrific past, and it was just life changing for me. So my family, after that Fulbright, we actually stayed. My father, Ebony magazine opened up a South African branch, and my father was the managing editor, and so I moved from sort of the suburbs of DC to Johannesburg, and it just blew open my mind
Yeah.
in so many ways, and storytelling and understanding different cultural, experiences all came through how we share our lived experiences, and that was through stories.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's a lot to all of that. And I'm curious, how were you and your family treated as Americans in South Africa post-apartheid?
It was very different. I tell people that all the time. You know, the United States has a very interesting um, view of race. And it's very different when you go outside of the U.S. context because it's less about something as arbitrary as the as skin color, and it's more about ethnicity. It's more about language. It's more about culture. And so, even though as an African American family moving to South Africa, we weren't South African. We didn't speak Zulu, we didn't speak Xhosa, we didn't speak Afrikaans, we didn't speak any of the local languages. Yes, at the time, English was one of the official languages, but there were 11.
Wow.
There was this intentionality of how far they went so far from segregation. It was like everybody's welcome, literally the Rainbow Nation. Anyway, I don't care where you're from, what language you speak, which ethnicity you embrace. We're all under the Rainbow Nation. But on the ground, what that looked like was a country still very deeply, the scars of apartheid were still very fresh. The wounds, they weren't even scars, they were open wounds. And we experienced, let me just be very clear, I won't speak for my siblings or my parents, but I experienced at 15, didn't really fit in. We obviously weren't South Africans, we weren't African. It's like we came from another African country. But that's the first time I realized that complexion, race, again, these sort of very arbitrary things they don't have the same context there. So I we were considered expats. And you're not from here, but the economy had just opened up. So after sanctions, and there was a flood of European and American companies that then said, okay, this is now a new market. So there was this influx between 94 to 95 to 2000 of all of these companies, bringing employees, ourselves included, to the country. And it was hard. It was hard. I mean, high school, I think, is challenging no matter where you are, where you go.
Yes.
But if you can imagine high school in a context of a country emerging and trying to heal and grow, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. It was the most transformative um, period of my life. And if you kind of see in the background there, that's a picture of. So that's Jesse Jackson and Nelson Mandela. That's Winnie Mandela, and these are pictures that, as I said, we had a dark room in our basement. And so these are photos when Nelson Mandela was on his, both of them were actually on there. They did this big sort of tour
Yeah.
after he got elected. And Nelson Mandela spent the majority of his first 2 years in office actually traveling the world, and not as much on the ground in South Africa, which, depending on who you ask, was also a little controversial. But these were the images that my father had, and I literally found them in the basement and was like, these shouldn't be in a basement.
Yeah.
These these should be on display somewhere. So they're on display in my office.
Yeah. I love it. That's great. Thank you for sharing those. And so when I initially reached out, I was thinking about like Halloween coming up, spooky season,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about how Thriller,
Hmm.
the album and the video itself continues to play such a presence in our culture. And then so I'm like, okay, who can I talk to about this? That's an expert. Usually my path ends up to faculty members like yourself. And when I read your CV, I said this to you earlier, like I was just gagged. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I do want to talk about I do talk um about the video, the album and all of that, but then also Quincy Jones and the larger conversation around his work and then I also want to get back to some of the other parts of your work as well. So sort of, I guess instead of doing a 50,000 foot view, we'll do a smaller view and then work out. So can you talk a little bit about why it's such a cultural touchstone and why it has Thriller itself like has this staying power today?
Oh, that's such a good question, Megan. And I find it, when you said you were looking for experts on Quincy Jones and my name came up and I was like blown away. I was really like, me? But in
You.
the, fine, I was like, seriously? But I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Jones a couple of times. And also just, if you have listened to music in the last 65 years, I mean, across every genre,
Yes.
Quincy Jones has impacted your 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 musical interests and tastes
Hmm.
because he touched everything. And his work with Michael Jackson, and I'm going to go back just a little bit because I
Sure.
think it's important, to the Off the Wall album, which I've always said and I do stand by is my favorite. This is Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. Um, we're talking 1976,
Hmm.
but really came out 78. When we look at Quincy Jones as a producer, very specifically, and I think a lot of people know that he has a musical background, but in producing in particular, Michael Jackson's Off the Wall is my favorite album of his. This is um his debut album as a solo artist. And of course, most people know him from, of course, the lead of the Jackson Five. But it was with Off the Wall that we really get an opportunity to see Michael Jackson, the young man, and not the little boy helming this family um group. And it is so profound and so powerful. And we see the synergy of Michael Jackson coming into his own as a solo artist and Quincy Jones really stepping it up a bit as a producer. And that album is the height of everything. It's disco, it's funk, it's a little jazz, it's R&B. And then we get to Thriller. And that album, which we're talking now, 1983, so 4 years after Off the Wall. And the question really for everyone was, are we going to avoid the sophomore slump?
Mm.
And the sophomore slump, which everyone knows for whether it be any type of artist, film, television, music, can you do it again? Right? You came out, you debuted, and of course, this isn't Michael Jackson. He's not debuting. We know who he is, but this is now him on his own, not with the accompaniment of his brothers, and really under also the guise of his father, of Joe Jackson. Right now, he's really stepped away. What is this going to look like? And what we all witnessed is the greatest selling album of all time. What we witnessed and what we were all blessed. And I think this is why it's such a phenomenal um, album. I mean, we're talking 1982 at the time. Like I said, the video came out December of 1983, so almost a year later. But it is everything wrapped up into one. It is suspenseful, it is exciting, it is melodic, and it's that interdisciplinary work. It's the hybrid of funk, pop, R&B, rock, as I mentioned, and that is what I think Quincy Jones is the essential and quintessential producer, because he is someone that was always able to tap into an artist's greatness, even greatness that they might not have seen. And Michael Jackson talked about this. And he didn't do a lot of interviews that we know. Michael was very shy when he wasn't on stage. And so he really let his artwork, his music speak for him. And Quincy Jones as the producer, and any person, whether you're producing music, you're producing television, you're producing art, you're a curator, the goal is to take an artist to heights that they might not even know. And that's what happened with Thriller as an album. And of course, a lot of people, and even you with sort of prefacing this conversation, a lot of people, when we look at Thriller, we do obviously think of Halloween. We think of
Yeah.
spooky and scary. And for everyone, including myself, I was 3 when the video came out. But it was scary when he, at that last scene, when he turns around and he has the cat eyes and you hear the spooky laugh, cackle, so to speak, kind of echo, terrifying,
Yeah.
literally terrifying. What I loved about Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson as a team, is their ability to push different boundaries
Mhm.
and to blend music in ways that people were like, well, you can't really do that. And they were like, we're gonna do that and more. We're going to bring pop, funk, disco. We're going to bring it all and mix it up and create essentially a new genre that still to this day is only something that a Michael Jackson and a Quincy Jones in collaboration can do. And so I think it resonates 43 years later because of its it's transcendent. It's not about race, gender, class. It is something that rises above and above the fray of the way people like to be classified,
Mhm.
um, into something that I think is we haven't seen since.
Mhm.
Uh, I can't think of any other producer artist duo that has been able to reach the heights that Quincy and Michael did in between like 1975 to 1985.
Yeah. And it's interesting as you were talking and talking about genres and how they incorporated so many and rising above, it made me think, so for listeners who follow me on Instagram, I feel like once a day I have like a Beyonce moment. I'm a big Beyonce fan. And I was thinking about Cowboy Carter and how that conversation has come out, but it's not quite the same, right? Like it doesn't it feels like what you're talking about with what Quincy and Michael did was the blueprint.
Absolutely.
And I love that, genres are a funny little thing, aren't they? And Cowboy Carter is a country album, but not like any other country album you've heard. It's a Beyonce album, right? So I love that, what they did is still impacting today. And again, I can't believe I live in the same timeline as Beyonce, but that's a different conversation probably.
I can't believe I lived in a time when Michael Jackson videos were world-stopping events. Like
Yes.
I tell my son who's 11 and I tell my students, when we really like think about, I was like, there have been very few cultural moments post, we'll just say like a social media era. So like within the last 25 years, where everyone stops for this experience.
Mhm.
And when Michael Jackson released music videos, albums, absolutely. But then when we had the visuals to accompany, like, what is he going to do? What is he going to say? What is he going to wear?
Yeah.
Right? What's going to happen? We've heard the song, but now let's see how he envisioned it. And he was groundbreaking then, and I don't see like there has never been a time since where you're talking prime time, every single like station, every single network, every broadcast is pausing for 15 minutes of a world premiere in primetime television. That's never happened
Yeah.
again. We don't see that. The 14-minute Thriller video, and this is when music videos used to, and this is where also people are like, music videos. And I'm like, yes, videos were obviously, they were very literal,
Mhm.
right? They were very, so what we heard is for the most part, that's what we were expecting to see. And even with the birth of something like an MTV, where you have music, and we had, obviously there were music videos before them, but there wasn't one place to go and watch all of them, which is what music television, right? MTV created in 1980 was like, we're just going to have a network that only plays music videos. Now they probably rarely play music
Yeah.
videos, but there was a time that's all they did, right? You might have a couple other, programming, but it was about the music videos. Like we just want one place where we can go and engage um with the visuals of the artists that we love to listen to. And Michael Jackson did that, whether it be with Thriller with the makeup, the artistry, the infamous Vincent Price, I'll call it a rap, right, like at the end, or spoken word, however you want to look at that. But the cultural impact, it's like just one of the most, it's a cultural touchstone for not only Halloween, but it rises even above any sort of, holiday or moment in time. You can, yes, engage with it in the month of October and on October 31st, but you can also watch this in January and March and
Yep.
July. Like, you can engage with Michael Jackson's visual artistry anytime. And then, speaking of Beyonce, what I so love about her, and she's clearly, like, we all kind of grew up in this same, like, she was obviously influenced by Michael, and obviously his sister Janet as well. She talks about that quite frequently, and even talking about looking at Cowboy Carter. When I think of the cultural relevance of someone like a Beyonce, and the fact that she defies genre. She is her own. And so I was not surprised to see the Grammys after she won, um, in 2025 for Cowboy Carter, which won Best Country Album, that then the industry said, "Now we need 2 country categories." Now which, you can go back and forth and argue or not about the reasons for that. It's kinda interesting that when a Black woman or just a Black artist, gets recognition, then all of a sudden they're like, "We need 2, we need contemporary and traditional," which I think was quite, disappointing of the Academy to do so. But then again, Beyoncé has been producing phenomenal work for the last 2 decades, and she should have won album of the year for Lemonade. I could name like 5 other albums, in all fairness,
Yeah.
that were equally, and Adele, Taylor Swift, and everybody else said the same thing. They're like,
Right.
"Hold up, how are we in the same category?" And she's not winning
Right.
because she should be winning. And I think it's really, really interesting when even you look back at the 1984 Grammys, when Michael Jackson swept everything and won every award, and was bending genres. And that was the blueprint for where we are, with most artists now, where you don't have to stay in any sort of creative box, and you can allow your artistry to ebb and flow. My guess for Beyonce is going to be a rock album next.
Me too.
I think that's where she's going. I think it's gonna be very much so like an ode to Tina Turner type vibe. And it's going to be phenomenal.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. And whatever it is, I'm gonna love it, and I'll go to the concert. So,
Clear.
yeah, yeah. And I love the fact that you brought up Vincent Price, because we accept it as just part of the song, and it's part of the album. I mean, the brilliance of that. Can you talk about really the video itself, and the song itself is so, and this isn't the right word, but it's odd, right? Like we accept it, but it must have been pretty revolutionary at the time. Like, we hadn't seen anything like it. So what was the genesis of that, and what was Quincy's touch on all of this?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Megan, because I want to also, Ola Ray as the terrified girlfriend, they're on a date, they're seeing a horror movie. Like I said, we don't have 14-minute music videos anymore,
No.
right? Like Michael Jackson, we didn't have 14-minute music videos before Thriller.
Right.
Um, Most of the time, like I said, music videos were the visual representation of the song. So if the song was 3.5 minutes, you'll get a 3.5 minute video, right? Like, we're
Right.
not going to give you
Right.
a 6 minute intro um, of setting up of, like, what are we doing? Where are they going? Why do we just see, like, this is a date? Like, what's
Right.
happening? You're not gonna give you're not gonna have these elaborate, choreographed, numbers in the middle of, these super phenomenal dance breaks. And again, it's the storytelling. And I think what Michael Jackson did so phenomenally and inspired so many, not including in his family. We can talk about Janet and what she did with Rhythm Nation, which was very shortly thereafter and also at the same time as Bad. And when we look at the way in which artists, all touched by Quincy, but albums truly used to be, Megan, and we're kind of generationally the same, is that we used to have these full experiences. It wasn't just we're going to release a single and then the other 6, 12, 13 songs that like you don't really pay attention to. We truly had albums that were full creative cultural experiences, right? You're going to get a true story. You're going to have a beginning, you're going to have intros, you're going to have interludes, a strong beginning, middle, and end, which is I tell my students all the time, which is what a good story is. They're going to be thematic. They're going to be, and that's what we had with Thriller. That's what we had with the Bad album. For those who probably remember the film Moonwalker, which was I mean, there was an entire film, like not even just 1, 2 videos. You had an entire 90-minute film based off of one album.
Right.
We don't have that. We don't see that from artists, and it was absolutely revolutionary. And Quincy Jones was all in that because he understood very, very early on. And I think part of this is because this is someone who worked with everyone from Frank Sinatra. I mean, the list again of his discography is deep. And I encourage everyone of your listeners, if you're not familiar with Quincy, his daughter Rashida Jones did a beautiful documentary film about 6 years ago that really was obviously a love letter to her father, but for all of us as an audience, as a society, to really see and understand what he was able to touch again over well over half a century. And one of the things that Quincy did so well, which we saw the influence with Michael and subsequently Thriller and albums after that, was we're not doing one-offs, and one-offs in the sense of we're gonna have a single, we're gonna have an album. Again, this whole thematic experience. And Beyonce, because continue throwing her in her, she gave us that visually. Beyonce would come and we would get a visual album, which is what she literally referred to, that she's going to just drop in the middle of the night. We're going to see Lemonade, I think, is arguably the best example. We haven't seen as many visuals the way we did with the Lemonade album, but I think that's the best example. I would compare that Lemonade visual album to I think the Moonwalker Bad album, where you have this full on, you could watch from track 1 all the way through, and you're seeing all of these themes woven throughout. You're seeing the personal nature and touch. You're seeing all of this creativity on display, from the vocals to the visuals. And the vocals to the visuals is the way in which I see, and a lot of us who are forget critics, we're just fans, right? We're just fans of this work. That they are intertwined. You don't have one without the other. And Quincy believed in that. He wanted to nurture the holistic. Quincy Jones, which I remind people, I love his musical work as much as I love his television and film work. And I think we would be lost if we forget his influence on something like Alice Walker's The Color Purple, which then he, introduced the world to what we all knew as a television show host and a journalist out of Chicago, Oprah Winfrey. He was like, I think Oprah should be in this film. We need to have Whoopi Goldberg. We need to have Danny Glover. We need to have, like, we're gonna have Steven Spielberg direct, which at the time was controversial. At the time they were like, why didn't you ask like a Spike Lee or another Black director? You went with Spielberg, who had just come off of coming off of Indiana Jones, and they were like, wait a minute, we don't understand why, but it worked because Quincy understood And Quincy did not box people in based on race, gender, ethnicity in a time when everyone was doing that. Oh, you're a Black director, you're a Black artist. And he's like, no, you're just an artist. You're just a musician. You're just a storyteller. And he wasn't going to place people into these categories that so many times people, and again, especially in a US context, we want to put people into categories. What are you? Racially, ethnically, what style? People were like, well, Beyonce can't do country. And it was like, what do you mean she can't do country? Like, that doesn't even, like, that sentence doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
She's an artist. She can, who's from Texas. Like,
He's the dude.
I fully was like, y'all do know she from Texas, right? Like,
Yeah.
her first, like, she used to perform at the rodeos in Houston. Like, I don't understand where y'all, like, well before it was a Destiny's Child and there was a Beyonce, she was in, like, country is in her DNA.
Yes.
And so that to me is always kind of crazy. But Quincy Jones and Michael, um, they intentionally push back against the boxes that people try to put them in, that they continuously and constantly defied.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So, and if I'm totally off base here, please tell me, but thinking about Quincy's career, thinking about his partnership with Michael, we're coming out of the civil rights era. We're coming, out of this huge cultural transformational change in the United States. And he's saying, no, I'm not going to box people in. I'm not going to limit. But I also feel like Quincy Jones on the flip side was, I'm going to celebrate Black culture in America. And I'm not going to limit us in terms of how we do that. Do you think that's accurate? And I guess also, what is Thriller and Bad and even Off the Wall to an extent? Like, what is it telling us? If we're looking at Quincy Jones as a storyteller and in the context of his work, what was he telling us at the time?
Yeah,
And let me also clarify, like, us in the United States, and then also if there's a global us.
yeah, yeah. Um, oh, that's such a great question. Also, and I think it would be lost on people if they didn't focus on the fact that Quincy Jones, was born into a segregated country, and a place that had its own form of apartheid in the sense of Jim Crow and restrictions, and Quincy really bucked at from very early on in his career. He really bucked at the notion um, of separation in a way that he used his artistry um, as a form of integration and as a way to bring cultures and communities together despite the better intentions of federal, state legislation and policies, right? Like Quincy grew up in a time where he had to perform in segregated spaces. He could not walk into the front door of um places where he was on the bill, he was on the list. People were coming to see him perform. And he had to go around through the back to come in. He couldn't walk in the front door. And he's creating and coming into I believe the sort of height of his, or the pinnacle moment of his career, um in a time and place that the country, it was his own form of protest. And so even if we look at another film that I really love, that recently came out on Netflix, that looks at the night that is called The Greatest Night in Pop.
Yes.
And it's by a phenomenal director, Bao Nguyen, a Vietnamese American director, a friend of mine. And it's just such a beautiful film because it looks at the ways in which the night that the We Are the World, which most of us know as a song for back then, but I don't think they understood, like, it was for AIDS relief in Africa and all these other things. But Quincy Jones he was like dead in the middle of that. Him, Lionel Richie, Michael Jackson like wrote the hook, Stevie Wonder, and sort of, this ability with music and through music, and that We Are the World is a prime example of that, where musicians of all genres, all races, ethnicities, etc., coming together for one purpose. And this particular purpose with We Are the World was to raise money for famine relief in Africa. And I think that is such a prime example. This is also in 1985. And so when you think of really, like you said, what was happening societally at that time, what does all of this look like? And who is someone who is using their talents, their creativity, their artistry to bring communities together at a time of chaos, at a time of, like you said, whether it be, you know, 20 years earlier, you look 85 to 1965, you look at the civil rights movement, you look at someone who was very much so an advocate, but an advocate in the way of using his artistry, using his work, using music in particular as a way to integrate communities um, and dance floors, radio waves, in a way that wasn't happening. And I don't think any other artist, any other producer, any other creative had the impact that Quincy Jones did to bring cultures together.
Yeah. And in this moment in time that we're in, where it feels like everything is so divisive, and I was thinking about this the other day. I'm a big Marvel fan and I love the idea of the multiverse in general. And I was like, man, we're living in the
Yeah.
multiverse that we've created for ourselves. The internet, like we're living in totally different realities. What do you think is so instructive about the way that Quincy approached this collaborative nature? Like what can we learn from it? And especially coming from a time when, like you said, he grew up in a segregated nation, a formally segregated nation, a
Oh,
legislatively segregated nation. What can we learn from that in this time where it feels like we are so disparate from each other?
yeah. I've often wondered when I think of people like a Quincy Jones who used his creativity, his work to bring communities and cultures together, and who unapologetically, celebrated Black artists and Black music and Black culture, and in a time where it feels very regressive right now. It
Mhm.
feels like a backslide um, in a way that is really disheartening and really um, disparaging and disappointing. And I've often wondered, what would insert blank do? Like with
Right.
if so and so was still with us, how would they respond in these moments? And I think that their response would be, and what we're missing right now is common ground. What we're missing is empathy. um what we are lacking or seem to have forgotten is civility. um and this is coming from a place of knowing that the United States has long had periods of uncivility, and and we have lacked empathy. And then I felt like there had been an upswing, and we had been moving in a direction of less divisiveness. And I don't feel that we are. And I feel like we're headed in a more divisive direction. Um, and I don't foresee, unfortunately, any sort of unity or harmony on the horizon. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that we are going to see artists in particular, because I do believe that artists are the ones who who take the risk in these moments to use their creativity to bring communities and cultures together. And I know it's not as simple as let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and like sway together. But at the same time, I'm also like, I feel like we need a big ass group hug.
Yes.
Like, as much as I'm like, I don't know if we just go, we are the world together,
Right.
and then everything's fine. No,
Fence across America.
literally,
Literally. But
um,
it's so fascinating though, because I co-sign everything that you're saying. And I talk to my friend Matt about this a lot of like, we don't have these cultural monoliths anymore, right? Like we don't have a 15-minute premiere of a video by a worldwide artist. We don't have a We Are the World. I started laughing when you said that. Like Lionel Richie, Quincy Jones, Michael Jackson,
Cyndi Lauper.
insane. And then like in the documentary, Bob Dylan's just there, like
It was so awkward. I
so
loved it. Like
weird.
everything about it. I was like, this is amazing. Cyndi Lauper were there, like, can you take that necklace off? And I was just like, this is amazing.
It's amazing. But we don't have that anymore. And I think and I don't know that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I can't speak to that. If you think back to COVID and when stars or artists started to do these sort of kumbaya moments, it almost felt unauthentic. And I'm wondering if, and there was almost more backlash to that, right? And I'm almost wondering, as I'm thinking about Quincy, like, yes, he did all of this as an artist, as a producer, and crossing genres and being collaborative, but he also walked the walk, right? Like he also was someone who engaged in politics and engaged in civil rights. And I'm wondering if that's, maybe part of what we're missing. It's that cultural monolith and then people who are only speaking out after the fact, like not being proactive. And it seems like his work was so rooted in his worldview and how he wanted to see the world and how he wanted us to experience each other.
That is so poignant because there has to be a bit of delusional optimism. Right? There has to be. I mean, even to come up with the idea for a We Are the World, or that wasn't obviously originally the title, but like whoever, which, if I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the film, and you should actually go watch it because it's on Netflix and it's amazing. The Greatest Night in Pop. But to come up with this idea of like, so what if, right? Like, what if we got all these artists together? Well, when are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? Right? Ooh, the American Music Awards, right? Like like, so we know a lot of people are going to be in town. What if we, um, and the last time I really felt that I saw that, was, yes, COVID, but honestly, Hurricane Katrina. Like, I
Mhm.
remember very vividly, and also because, speaking of another documentary, shout out to Spike Lee, Come Hell and High Water, which is a 3-part series. It's on Netflix right now also, but about looking back 20 years of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans and everything that happened there. And there's a clip in the second episode that looks at the telethon. And that people are like, what is a telethon? There were these moments when people would get together and you could call, right. And it would be broadcast. And the whole point was to raise awareness,
Right.
but also fundraise, right, for a certain, a lot of times disaster relief or some
Right.
of these things in the case of Hurricane Katrina. And I think back to, like, we've lost that. We've lost this collective, right, like, come together. And it is something that genuinely breaks my heart, because when I think of, if there are, we're so divisive politically, but that sort of seeps into culture. It seeps into society. It seeps into everything. It really frustrates me when people say things like, well, I'm not political, and I'm like, are you alive? Like, do you
Your very existence is political.
like,
Your trash pickup is political.
seriously, the when you turn on a faucet in your house or at your school or at your office, and
Yep.
the water is not contaminated, that is politics, right? You can take a shower and not have to worry about the water burning your skin because it was contaminated with something. That is politics. And so when I think of the way in which artists, Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson, who wasn't overwhelmingly political, in
Mhm.
all fairness, he had obviously his stances, But when I think about, like, there used to be in my lifetime, I'm 45, where artists were not afraid, athletes were not afraid to take a stance, to speak and vocalize their viewpoint.
Mm.
Um, and we're now in a place and space where, depending on what that viewpoint is, your entire livelihood could be wiped away. Your entire um views are now at they come at a cost.
Mhm.
And I say this to my I said this to my students actually yesterday, that silence is free. You don't have to share every thought you have. You don't have to share every, you know, every moment of your day. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Silence is free, but words are very expensive. They're very, very expensive. They cost a lot.
Yeah.
And we live in a time, unfortunately, where we're seeing rhetoric ruin and take lives.
Mhm.
And I think about when we were at a point where, again, the 80s weren't perfect. The 80s were very,
Sure.
like, not, I'm not over here trying to have a revisionist
Right.
history of the 80s, but I do feel like it was a time, especially in retrospect, right? Like, I was 10 and under in the 80s. So let's just be very clear about that. I wasn't voting. I wasn't making, like,
Right.
I didn't understand the politics of water. Right? Like, I
Right.
was
Right.
grateful that I could go to a faucet and turn it on, and I just knew that the water coming out we weren't filtering water, like little things like that. I was just, it was the 80s. We barely wore seatbelts. Like, it was time. It was a time. And I think about how then, and I look at my son now who's 11, and so the last like 10 years of his life, and how it's been very, very different between 2013 to 2025. He'll be 12 in December. And I just think, and I'm like, wow, like, from 80 to 92, I mean, it was a crazy time, but like, artists could share opinions. Artists came together around topics. There were these general I mean, I saw Nelson Mandela freed from prison
Right.
in the first 12, but like, I mean, there's all these things that happened. I saw, relatively speaking, the end of apartheid in my lifetime. I saw how global sanctions, boycotts, and divestment led to the international pressure to end apartheid in South Africa, and what that looked like. And I think now we're in such a very, very different time. And I even go back to the storytelling, the ability to tell stories, the ability to use our stories, whether they be in something like an artist, like a Michael Jackson telling the story on the Thriller or the Bad or the Off the Wall album, or even his sister using Rhythm Nation 1814 to have a larger, that's an incredibly social and politically charged album. Janet was talking about everything. I mean, we are the Rhythm Nation. She was literally calling for unity. She was having a conversation about gun violence in that album. She was having the intentionality for that entire visual album. This was 1989.
Yeah.
Entire visual album in black and white. Which was, again, very, very intentional. This is her sophomore album. Speaking of sophomore albums, right? Thinking of what, like, this was, everyone was like, okay, Control was a hit, but all
Now what?
right. I mean,
Yeah.
now what you about to do? And for her to have that breakout moment, but we don't have political, um we don't have albums, we don't have artists who are able to have a conversation about homelessness or about racism, in the way that we were able to do. And that is that is also very disheartening for me when I tell my son that there was a time when people could do this or artists could do this, and he's like, people could never.
Yeah.
People could never right now. And it really has me questioning just a lot how I parent, how I participate in, how I teach. My
Mhm.
pedagogy around teaching ebbs and flows and evolves. I've seen colleagues and professors all around me being censored for
Mhm.
their views, for their social media post, and in ways that I honestly never thought we would be.
What do you think your parents, they gave you so much and shaped so much of who you are, it seems like, what would they or what do they say about this time or approach this time? It just feels like, um, again, just two totally different universes. And what can we learn, I guess, from our past and um, maybe how we can take some of those cues and pull it back a little bit.
Yeah, that's so great. I I know that my mother, who she passed October 25th of 2022, and I think of her obviously often. I think anyone who's lost a parent, but in particular your mom, um, even regardless of what that relationship might look like, it is life altering.
Mhm.
It's like life with mom in the present and then life like post mom in the present. And so I've been, especially coming up as we come up on year 3, um, I find myself asking that question a lot, like what would she think of everything right now? And my mother was very steady. She was just a very steady person, and even I'm so grateful that she was able to um, live in a time to see someone like a Barack Obama elected president twice, and she was very active and volunteering at the White House under his tenure, um, and like the Easter egg roll and all these like fun things that she would do, and she was just grateful to serve. And so, what they would do right now is they would say, in terms of like, stay rooted. I know that, like, stay rooted, stay connected. This is the time where our values really start to stand out. They become profoundly more. What are your values? What do you stand for? And she stood for um again, inclusivity. My mother loved, you know, all people, but I mean that in the sense of she very much so, as someone who also was born in segregated St. Louis, Missouri, and went to segregated elementary, middle, and even high schools, um, that she truly believed in the importance of, community. And so rely on your community, stay steadfast in your community. And so when I think of, what I feel are really, again, divisive times, but I just have to lean on the the foundation of community. Like, we need each other. Like, no one is going to come and save you. And this is about anything. I want to be very clear.
Correct.
Like, anything. Like, no one is coming to rescue any of us.
Right.
Um, if my neighbor has an issue, um, my neighbor was they're older, and it was like they had an issue with like getting their trash cans like to and from the garage door to the street for trash pickup. And so I just made it a point that so every night, the night before trash, like we go help take their trash cans out,
Right.
right? Because that's what the community does. That's what neighbors do. And so if they get around to calling and 311 and getting on the list where that great. But in the meantime, we're gonna come and help you out. Like, because
Right.
that's what community does. Community helps community. And this is where I hope that as we do move forward, and I don't know anyone who like everyone's like, well, what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, focus on like community, focus on doing what you can do to maintain staying healthy, financially, physically, emotionally, turn off some of these divisive channels. And I mean that, and that's not in a like literal sense, but it is in a literal sense. Like, put the phone
Right.
down.
Right.
Like, put the phone down. Like, the doom scrolling, put it down.
Right.
Go take a walk, go get some fresh air, go touch some grass,
Yeah.
uh, go play with your kids off of screens. Like,
Yeah.
we all see it. We go out to dinner or we're out somewhere and parents, kids involved, everyone's at the table on their phone.
Right.
Put the phones down, play a
Yeah.
game, talk to each other, hug somebody. And so I'm relying on um, those foundations to stay steadfast. Because I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going anywhere. So I was
Yeah.
like, it's well, God willing, right? So
Yeah.
I might as well find ways to get more rooted um during times that feel really uncertain.
Yeah. Yeah. And the example of taking your neighbor's trash out is a perfect one because it's we can all do it. We can all serve, right, in different ways. And it's participating in the society we want to live in. I mean, it's you're not going up and saying, "Who did you vote for?" It's like, "Hey, they need some help. I'm taking the trash out for them." Right? And that's living in the society that you want to live in. Um,
Absolutely.
well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to make sure listeners hear?
I just will wrap up, Megan, and say, I really am optimistic.
Yeah.
I am optimistic. I said I am optimistic. Whether it be, I think I'm paying attention to artists right now. I'm paying attention to musicians. I'm seeing what is coming out, but I'm also creating art myself
Mhm.
and doing things to be productive. And so I really just um it feels revolutionary right now to be optimistic.
Mhm.
To intentionally say I'm going to look at for good right here.
Yeah.
Said I'm not leaving. I'm not trying to be an expat again. I I wanna stay and work on and in community. Um, and so yeah, try to find things to be optimistic about.
Yeah. I agree. That's a great place to end that part of our conversation. What do you love most about what you do?
Oh, I think what I love most about what I do, and I started, I'm a cultural curator. And it was a friend of mine who reminded me, she's like, "Well, you've been doing this. You've been bringing community and culture together since we were in undergrad." And I went to Washington University in St. Louis. Um, and then I have my master's and my doctorate from Howard University here in DC. And I think about culture and celebrating. And so I love being able to. I have two books coming out actually next month, October. The first one is called Framing Fatherhood, a celebration of Black fathers. And it it's a culmination of several years of work. And it's just it's a coffee table book. It's a beautiful photography book. It's a great gift. Everyone should get it. Published by Andrew McNeil's Publishing, distributed by Simon and Schuster, and I'm just really grateful for all the people who trusted me with their work to put it together and tell this beautiful story. My second book is called Sacred Sisterhoods, a celebration of Black women's friendships on television and film. And so for me right now, it's very intentional. I love about my work is I'm intentionally choosing again to celebrate, to
Mhm.
be optimistic, to find joy. Sacred Sisterhoods is also another um, long project that I'm the editor. It's a collection of essays from Black women scholars and academics and cultural critics, and it's just a love letter. It started at the end of um, the last season of HBO's Insecure, which is a phenomenal show created by Issa Rae and Larry Wilmore, and it's just a really I was so emotional at the end of this series, that I was just like, "Oh my gosh, are other people emotional? Is everyone else crying on their couch right now? Because 'Cause I'm crying on my
I was
couch."
like, "I don't want you to go. I want you to stay on."
I was
Yeah.
so sad, and, but I understood as shows do, and I had rewatched, I've seen probably every season at least 4 or 5 times at this point, but I realized that I was like, "I just wanna," and I'm an
Yeah.
academic, and I'm a scholar, but I was like, "I just wanna do this love letter." So it's a really beautiful It's scholarly and academically, but it's truly just a love letter to people like Issa Rae and Quinta Brunson and Debbie Allen and Yvette Lee Bowser and Mara Braca Keel and Gina Prince Bythewood and all these amazing Black women who are creatives on television and in film. And so that's what I love about what I do right now. I'm intentionally choosing to celebrate, to love, to put love out in the world. Um, it wasn't intentional that both books are published within a week of each other. It had nothing to do with me, if you can imagine. But I think it's really timely and in a moment in my life and in just the world around me where it feels like we just need more celebration. We need more love.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to in celebration of my mother and her life and her influence to just put love out into the world, put positivity out there, because I think we could use a little more of that.
I love that. And what advice would you give to your younger self?
That's also a great question. That you did prep me on, so I should have been prepared. But then I also was like, don't think too deep about it. I would tell very particularly my 22-year-old self, and I think about my 22-year-old self because, I'm a college professor and so I think about my senior year in college often. Um, and I would tell my 22-year-old self that everything is going to be okay. Um, Trust yourself and put the camera down. Okay. Look up, look
Yeah.
around.
Look up.
I think there's so often, especially in those late teen, early 20s, where a lot of us are kind of on a like, we got to move around kind of a rat race. And just like look up and
Look up.
around. Yeah, look up.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
like I have to do this and I have to hit this milestone and I gotta meet this person and I gotta do this and I gotta do that. And I would tell 22-year-old Imani to relax,
Yeah.
to enjoy it.
Mm.
I don't think a lot of times we're just kind of rushing through life and then we look up and we're like, I'm what? What happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. I would also tell her to call your mom.
I would tell both of us, take lots of pictures because your skin and body look amazing, regardless of what you think.
The time I wasted thinking I was not great is
Yeah.
sad. It's like, oh my God, I was so fat. I look at pictures. I was like, girl, you looked great.
Yeah.
Wear the two-piece.
Exactly.
Whatever you want. Let you care.
Exactly.
Wear whatever you want. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, do what you want, wear what you want, be kind to one another,
Yeah.
be kind to people.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Awesome. And how can people find you and find your work?
Yeah, you can find, I have a couple of websites. The cheersreport.com is my main website. That's where kind of all my work is. But you can find me in a classroom in Washington, D.C., educating. You can find me and my son scuba diving. I'm a big diver. And that's been a really beautiful activity to do with him. You had to be 10, so it's really before he could become certified. So it's really been an amazing experience
Cool.
to explore. So yeah, you can find me in Washington, D.C. You can find me at the Cheers Report. You can see some of our work there, and you can find Sacred Sisterhoods and Framing Fatherhood wherever you shop for your books, because we are there.
That's great. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was really wonderful.
Thank you for having me, Megan. It's really been a pleasure.